Good morning, everyone. This is Sudeep here, your host for the morning for the AI Parley. Uh, Setting the quick context and the agenda of this AI Parley as we move towards an increasingly contactless economy, banks and financial institutions are prioritizing digital innovation to address existing and emerging risks by developing strategies that focus on adoption of appropriate digital technologies, specifically AI. Keeping this in mind, we are glad to announce our third edition of AI Parley, an initiative of Ktech Centre of Excellence for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. In this edition, we will try to understand how the BFSI sector is harnessing the power of AI and proliferating at scale adoption. With a special focus on key areas of AI implementation, such as customer management and risk and compliance. The duration of this virtual event would be 90 minutes, comprising of a keynote address. There is a AI BFSI playbook launch and there would be two panel discussions, allowing participants across the globe to engage in an insightful conversation. With that, I have the honor of introducing Mr. Sankarshan Banerjee as our keynote speaker, who will provide his perspectives on how BFSI enterprises are increasingly viewing AI as a core business differentiator rather than just an enabler, and the sector is expected to play a crucial role in driving mass scale adoption. Sankarshan Banerjee is a Chief Information Officer at RBL Bank. He is an accomplished technology professional with over 23 years of multifaceted experiences in the industry. In his current role at RBL, Sankarshan is responsible for information technology, optimizing legacy IT systems, identifying and adopting innovation, and enabling digital transformation of the bank. Prior to joining RBL, Sankarshan was a Chief Technology Officer at National Stock Exchange. He has worked in both sides of the divide, I would say IT companies as well as technology and cloud, as well as organizations, user organizations. So he has worked in IBM, Emphasis, Accenture, where he led the technology and cloud and mobility practices for India. And the other organizations would be Future Group and IIFL. He has also been part of a venture capital firm helping review technology investments. Sankarshan is an alumnus of IIT Kharagpur and IIM Calcutta. With that, now I hand it over to Sankarshan for the keynote. Over to you.
Thank you. So, when NASCOM approached me for the keynote, my biggest worry was, how do I talk anything sensible to a whole bunch of people who already know a lot about AI and a lot about BFSI? And the challenge has always been that the technologies that I engage with or adopt are already well understood in the market. So I was wondering, what do I say about my keynote? And I realized probably the biggest value that people will get from my keynote is if I describe how to go about adopting AI today in the real world to generate actual value. And I'll talk about my experiences and also a few pointers. Now, I'm going to share my presentation. So how do we today use AI to generate the next wave of growth and opportunity, in particular BFSI, but it applies to pretty much everything. All of us are familiar with the famous Gartner hype curve on AI. We've been talking about AI for a while. It started quite some time ago. I mean, AI has been around for quite a few years. The Turing test, which is what one of the early conversations of AI started, happened in the 1950s. But though a lot of the mathematics of AI, Turing, von Neumann created the underlying models, they did not have the compute power, they did not have the data. So they didn't go very far with it. I mean, they had a theoretical idea of what AI could be, but they couldn't go very far. The peak of expectation, to my mind, happened when all the Deep Blues, the Go Machine, the Deep Mind, the one that won Jeopardy, all those started defeating humans at certain tasks. So Deep Blue, the first of them was the winner at chess. He defeated Gary Kasparov. And then a whole bunch of other games where AI suddenly became the champion. And it was widely considered at that time that this is the peak, this is the start of the promise. In a few years, AI will take over everything. It turned out not to be that easy. It was much easier to win at a deterministic game than to win in the real world. And possibly the biggest disillusionment was with self-driving cars. You know, we've had self-driving cars for a while, but it has never been able to graduate outside very rigid test environments. So Google has been driving that self-driving car for 7, 8 years now, and we still don't actually have a self-driving car that you can buy. Tesla, Waymo, all these come with lots of catches. They work only in certain controlled environments. They need human supervision, and they definitely don't work in the streets of Bombay. However, AI kept maturing, and I would say today we are starting to understand how mature uses of AI. And this is where companies are starting to go up the slope of enlightenment and see actual productivity from many different use cases. Risk management, customer experience, lending, fraud and identification, all these are starting to get serious uses of AI. So what makes today's projects different, or how do we make sure that we are in that slope of enlightenment or plateau of productivity and not in the self-driving car mode? So that's what my talk is going to be about. I've decided I'll stick to 3 points. I have a fairly short amount of time, so it's not that I have a very long presentation. I won't cover comprehensiveness. What I'll do is I'll try and take 3 points which I think will make a difference to our lives. So the first is, you know, organizations are still especially in BFSI, but everywhere, are still in POC mode. But you see, unlike the self-driving cars of the world, most of the AI technology that banking could use today is actually quite mature. What are the examples? For instance, risk scoring is quite a mature AI technology. Fraud management is quite mature, and it comes from commercial providers. It also comes from open source. There is a whole range of fairly mature, well-tested, well-understood AI solutions in these areas. Customer experience, chatbots, all these are now mature technologies, and therefore I would strongly encourage CIOs and technology leaders to stop doing POCs. POCs are to understand when a technology is not entirely mature, when you do not know what it promises and whether it delivers what it promises. Today we are pretty sure, you know, nobody takes a POC of Microsoft Word anymore because we are pretty sure we know what it does. And AI is coming to that. And, you know, Gartner has done this study, and companies that do fewer POCs and focus on concrete plans to deploy it have better outcomes. POCs are often a way to say, I don't understand the technology, I therefore will not adopt it, I will keep doing experiments. It's a bit like, you know, when I run the marathon, I'm going to keep walking around my garden thinking I'm preparing for the marathon, but you're not really. You have to make a serious commitment if you're planning to run a marathon. And that's the stage that I want you to start considering. Make a serious commitment, and as part of that commitment, do some experiments, of course, but by and large, you already know from the market which technologies work well in various areas. And therefore, take one of those technologies and start buying it, adopting it, putting budgets behind it, putting actual timelines behind it. And that's where you will realize value. The second is, you know, and this is very important, AI has proved to be particularly successful when you take small projects as opposed to the self-driving car moonshots. Small projects are how, you know, by far the most pervasive use of AI in the world today is autocomplete. You know, when you type something into your browser's address bar, it gives you fairly good responses as to what you should be typing. And very often I don't need to type the full thing. That autocomplete actually is underlying it is a reasonably fancy AI that Google has implemented. It is by far more useful than a self-driving car. Or like, Alexa is very fancy AI, but would you choose Alexa or autocomplete? Which would give you more value? And this kind of small pervasive AI is across the board, especially for customer experience. You can remove many small irritants to a customer's journey by using this tiny AI. You know, reorienting in funds payouts to make sure that if he's at the end of the month, he's probably not going to be paying his bills yet. So don't put his bills on top of the pay list. If he's in the beginning of the month, he's probably going to be paying his electricity bill. So therefore put electricity bill on top of the pay list. Things like that, which make your life easier in many subtle ways. And AI has many of these use cases where you take small improvements and end up with big benefits. So that's what I want you to think small. I want you to think continuous incremental uses of AI. AI is a tool. It is not really going to replace humans. AI is a method of projection, of using the past to predict the future. The larger the prediction, the more likely it is to go wrong. And therefore, the value is unlikely to be realized if you do too complex a use case. This is where many a CIO has failed by taking a very ambitious project and then realizing that he neither has the data, nor the computing power, not even the sophistication of the model to be able to deliver it. But on the other hand, small is easily deployed. We've deployed recently a simple thing. Our error messages tend to be very cryptic. So we deployed a small tool called Grammarly. Again, you won't think of it as a BFSI use case, but you see, communicating with customers is everybody's use case. So we use Grammarly to correct the grammar of our error messages. Now, we are not going to be able to teach English to all our engineers or better English to all our engineers overnight, but Grammarly does a great job of cleaning it up. And therefore, the communication becomes clearer, becomes more accurate. Again, tiny AI, but very useful. The last one is AI, and this I can't stress enough. Today we are thinking only of the positive side of AI. But all AI models are prediction models. They take past data and try and predict the future. But there is an inherent risk in any prediction that relies on past data, because your past data is not 100% accurate. It is not 100% representative of all possible future states. And therefore, all AI models come built in with a bias. Now, sometimes that bias is a dangerous bias. For instance, facial recognition that the police use, it turns out that it is quite biased to certain sections of population. And it was leading to real harm. People were getting arrested based on how they look rather than whether they're actually likely to commit a crime or not. Similarly, there is bias in lending. When we make lending decisions or hiring decisions. So Amazon has a very famous use case from 2017 where they had to pull their AI out of their hiring decisions because Amazon's hiring algorithm was rejecting women at a much, much higher rate than the average population. So because of the biases of the people who fed the algorithm. And the bias may not be obvious upfront. A bias is a bit like it accumulates over time. So your model becomes more and more biased because you see you've taken an initial set and now you're using that to predict the next set. The next set therefore has a little more of the bias that the initial set has because you've eliminated everybody who did not fit in the initial set. The new set is less random and so on and so forth. It keeps getting less and less random and therefore more and more biased. Unless you build in corrective actions, most of your AI initiatives will fail after a while. They will start producing unacceptable amounts of errors. This is true of RPA, this is true of lending decisions, this is true of fraud decisions. We must be very careful to build in, while we implement the AI, the corrective mechanisms, human-initiated corrective mechanisms of the same models. So this combination of human corrective action with machine learning to run the day-to-day business is what proves to be most effective. Machines are very bad at self-correcting. And humans are good at self-correcting. They're good at gathering lots and lots of different kinds of data and trying to figure out okay, this is not quite what I thought it was. Whereas machine blindly say, oh, this was what is in the past, tomorrow it will be the same thing. And therefore, you must include in your own AI models the monitoring of the outcome and the way to change or constantly tweak the parameters. So that is pretty much it for my talk. I was given a very strict 15 minutes and I'm hoping I succeeded within the timeline. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Sankarshan. In fact, though the time was short, but you were very precise. If I have to make my remarks on that, you said stop POCs of already matured solutions. Very fair, true. Break down your problem into smaller problems or use cases, and implement AI. And the last one, again, very relevant. You spoke about include self-correcting and monitoring of outcomes part of your solution. That was really insightful. Thank you, Sankarshan. It was a pleasure, having you as our keynote speaker for the AI Parley. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So with that, I move on to the next part of our AI, journey of this AI Parley. Happy to introduce Achyuta Ghosh, who's the Senior Director at NASSCOM Research, to unveil the report on Indian BFSI, Unlocking the Transformation of Potential of AI. This report is aimed at assisting enterprises in identifying AI opportunities across the value chain, thereby providing them requisite ammunition to accelerate their journey to become an intelligent enterprise. Over to you, Achyuta, to launch the report.
Thank you, Sudeep. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, participants. AI is emerging as a potent force for enterprises to innovate and transform through technology and business model disruption. We all know that, right? Organizations across the sectors are realizing the potential of AI in diverse areas such as cost optimization, operational efficiency, customer experience, revenue growth. A lot of information is available on the what AI can do, right? But not much is available on the how part. I think that was the attempt when we started this research project. We started this series of playbooks to help enterprises realize their AI adoption journey. When we started, we thought we'll make one comprehensive study, but as we went through our research, we actually found out that each vertical will need to adopt AI in a very different manner. So this is our third playbook. We have launched the healthcare and the retail playbook earlier. So this is the playbook which is aimed at the BFSI sector, at BFSI end users, and we are honored to launch it in your presence. We have a short launch video to start this with, post which I would share some of the key findings. Over to you, Sudeep. Sudeep, would you like to play the video?
Sure.
Thank you, Sudeep. Sudeep, could you pull up
Can you see my screen?
I can't see anything on your screen.
One moment. I'll put that back in.
Yeah.
Is this good?
Yeah. Yeah, I think now it's visible. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Sudeep. Okay, great. So I hope all of you enjoyed the short video. I think, it was a quick summary of some of the key findings from the report, but I'd like to use the next 5 or 10 minutes to actually talk about some of the things that we have actually seen. Just some overview about the project, how we started this, right? We surveyed about 500 enterprises over a period of 3 to 4 months. And three key questions we asked. One question was, where should enterprises start their AI journey? The second question was, what is the provider side and the enterprise side, dynamics in the AI ecosystem? What's happening right now? And then how can enterprises move up the AI value curve? I think these were the three key questions that we kind of tried to answer in our research. Step one was to build a use case repository. So for every vertical, we have built a use case repository of over 100 odd use cases. The second one was to prioritize those use cases. Where do you start with? Where do you move towards? How do you, what are the pieces that you want to target towards the end of your journey? The third piece was, understand the provider landscape. Fourth piece was to understand the demand side at the enterprise level. What's their perception? What's their readiness around AI? And, how do they want to deploy AI? And the last step was basically to create the maturity model and the roadmap for adoption. So these were the key things that we kind of looked at when we started the research. About 120 BFSI CXOs responded in this survey. And we also looked at startups. We also did in-depth interviews with different stakeholder segments. Moving on to the key findings, Sudeep, if you can, next slide, please. Thank you. The first key finding that we saw was that, the BFSI sector has grown rapidly, and, it's in a way paving the way for massive AI-led transformation. Banking deposits, almost $2 trillion in FY19, growing at about 7% CAGR. Direct premiums in the insurance sector reached about 0.1 trillion at a CAGR of 13% over the last 5 years. So tremendous growth in the banking sector is seen. At the same time, when we looked at Indian banks, Indian BFSI enterprises, while they have made significant efforts to digitize their operations, they still lag behind global counterparts in the US or China. So that's something that has come out strongly. Second is, investments in digitization specifically will play a key role in transforming the legacy businesses and accelerating the shift towards BFSI models of the future is what we got as the first key finding. The second key finding was that COVID has aggravated existing operational challenges in the short term, but AI-driven business transformation can actually enable rapid recovery. I think that's something that came out strongly. When COVID happened, the BFSI sector reprioritized their ongoing AI initiatives to emphasize contactless and in the long term branchless operations. I think this is something that is here to stay. Something that happened during COVID is probably a lot of those may become the new normal. Digital BFSI enterprises adopted AI-based solutions such as secure virtual banking, intelligent customer support, real-time operational insights, and reporting to have significant advantages in the long term. The third key finding was that AI implementation has become a strategic C-suite priority for BFSI enterprises as they strive for customer experience enhancement, operational excellence, and proactive risk management. Typical use cases include within customer experiences, contextual offers, personalized financial management, customer service chatbots, right? From an operational excellence perspective, virtual backgrounds, automating claim processing, automation of routine tasks. I think these are key use cases that we saw. Risk management as a fallout of COVID-19 was the third key area, and we saw real-time cybersecurity, risk monitoring, robust credit assessments, compliance checks, etc. as use cases for AI. The fourth key finding that I see over here is that prioritization of use cases based on business impact and ease of implementation capabilities is a critical step in the enterprise's journey. And the journey is different for different enterprises. It's not the same for every bank or every financial institution for that matter. How do you choose your prioritizations? You choose on quick wins, right? What are the quick wins? Is customer engagement, is data reconciliation, personalized onboarding, credit scoring is something that came out as quick wins that banking organizations looked at AI for. What are the big bets, areas that will make a long-term impact, a big impact on the organization? Fraud detection, due diligence, risk modeling are key, areas which are big bets for AI. At an incremental level, premium calculators, documentation of quality control, ATM predictive maintenance, right? I mean, these are, incremental advantages that you get, but, that's also something that companies are organizing. Next page, please, Sudeep. The fifth key finding that came out from the report was what's important is that a lot of organizations are trying to do it all on their own. And some organizations are being a lot more collaborative. We found that the collaborative approach with providers actually helps deliver maximum impact at earliest time, and I think that's something that came out, and also the value factor came out. So there are product technology companies, for example, which offer enterprise grade AI platforms with verticalized solutions. They're all there in India. There are full stack solutions. There are multi-year strategic partnerships that can be built on that. There are technology service providers, right, who offer enterprise grade AI platforms also, and they provide insights, they provide application layers. And the third is, partnerships are again evolving towards end-to-end services, success fee based, outcome based, right? I think that's the way collaboration is happening in the AI space from the ecosystem. And then of course there are startups, right? There are a lot of startups who are offering point solutions that are highly customized to the sector. They provide insights and application layers. They help partner with BFSI companies to get a bigger share of the market. All that is there in the research report that we are releasing. More details are available there. The sixth key finding that we saw was that enterprises to navigate implementation challenges and regulatory hurdles are often, those are often less manageable internally. On a standalone basis. It's much better to do it by partnering with providers. You can focus on solving real business problems. Partner selection is based on organization priorities, capabilities, and mutual value creation opportunities. Articulating value from partnerships, establishing view on a long-term relationship, identifying internal subject matter experts to contribute, and defining risk and governance framework for collaboration. I think these are all angles that can be explored on the navigation piece. The seventh key point that we found out was that BFSI enterprises actually believe that the sector is at an inflection point, with many of them looking to adopt AI. If I look at insights specific to the BFSI sector, over 50% of the surveyed CXOs agreed that customer experience and operational efficiency are priority areas for AI in BFSI. However, just 50% believe that risk management is a priority area. We believe that risk management has to be, a big priority area for BFSI. The second, insight is that the value articulation, low ecosystem maturity, and low digitization are seen as key challenges to deployment of AI by BFSI CXOs. The third point is that data security and data privacy are key implementation risks for nearly 35% of the BFSI enterprises, which also, augurs well because, people are really thinking it in that direction. Almost half the BFSI enterprises who implemented AI are not satisfied with their AI implementation. I think that was also a key insight that came out, which means that, what you start with and what you end up with, there is a gap in terms of, your assessment of how things will turn out. So we as implementers need to be cognizant of that and be a lot more realistic in the impact that AI can create for you. Reskilling existing talent, followed by new talent acquisition, are believed to be the most existing strategy for building AI capability. This is a theme that resonated throughout the survey, not only for BFSI, but all the other vertical playbooks that we have done. And last but not the least is that an AI charter, which is based on the company's strategy and vision, can actually enable long-term sustainable benefits. I'll touch upon this in another slide later on. Sudeep, will you move on to the next slide, please? Thank you, Sudeep. So I just wanted to, take you through a couple of interesting visualizations of the use cases in the playbook that we have put together. This is a periodic table format that we kind of build in, and if you see the different colors, yellow, blue, green, and red, those are your value chains for BFSI. So you have sales and marketing, customer management, core transactions, and risk and compliance. These are your 4 value chain segments. And the use cases are actually in the are color coded below, and the intensity of the color shows the importance of the use case, right? So you see the green use cases, those are the core transaction use cases that we have outlined. Sales and marketing is in yellow, the customer management use cases are in blue, and the risk and compliance use cases are in red, in different shades of red. In this way, we wanted to capture, what should an enterprise start with, what should an enterprise move towards, what can actually build a lot of impact. So there are some 110 use cases in the report. This is one way that we have picturized it. Next slide, please, Sudeep. The next slide also is a picturization of the same use cases, but in a 2x2 matrix. We have actually put all those use cases around business impact on the x-axis, y-axis, and then you've got the ease of implementation on the x-axis. And then there is a 2x2 matrix that we have. We have 4 buckets: reconsidered, incremental, quick wins, and big bets. The case studies are again built in that direction, and it will actually help an organization decide on what to pick up and where to move on to. So that's another interesting visualization of the use cases that we have put together. Next slide, please, Sudeep. Right. The report actually charts a path for organizations to move from an explorer. So we have three categories of people, right? 3 or 4 categories of people, users of AI. We have the explorer category at the start, then we have enthusiast, we have experts, and then we have evangelist. These are the 4 levels of AI implementers or users in the BFSI segment. And we have 3 or 4 suggestions to explore and move as people move from a explorer category to an evangelist category. First and foremost, what we see is that we have to make executive sponsorship a key imperative for people to adopt AI at scale. So having strong executive leadership support and ensuring AI is a part of organization strategy aligned with business priorities is the first step. The second step we see is, how do you seed AI competency to go beyond POC? So how do you set up dedicated teams to drive POCs and increase credibility for leadership buy-in? Dedicated talent is very important over here. The third is, collaborated with the AI ecosystem to build POCs. One is to do it on your own, but the more effective way is to explore the AI ecosystem and try to get speed and scale and value into your POCs also. The fourth is, ensure AI outcomes are aligned with business metrics. So alignment of AI outcomes with metrics that matter to the company. I mean, whether it is revenue growth, customer experience, employee growth, etc., etc. I think the AI outcome should be measured with key KPIs for the industry, for your organization. The fifth is, having a strong risk and compliance with AI know-how. So having robust risk policies, building teams that are well versed in AI technologies, and understanding the complexities is very important. Sixth point is establishing strategic partnerships with mature tech players. A lot of tech players who have matured their capabilities from a service and product perspective on AI. How do you, kind of build that partnership with them? The next one is, building trust on AI. So building ethical systems for AI by inverse reinforcement learning and through explainable AI, right? I mean, this is something that people do not consider when they start their AI journey, but this becomes very important as we move forward. Trust on AI is very important. The next is, democratization of AI. So how do I encourage AI usage across the firm, not limited to particular areas or particular teams? And you remove the data divide. And the last point is, how to scale AI to focus on product innovation, risk, and compliance. So you leverage AI in product innovation development, innovations in adjacent markets, such as banks and marketplaces, and banks as service providers. So some of the key insights that we saw, these are the 9 strategic plays that organizations can utilize when they try to move from explorer to an evangelist mode. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think the road ahead, as acknowledged by most of the CXOs who participated in the research, AI holds tremendous potential for helping companies innovate, enhance competitiveness, and generate significant long-term value. But several AI adopters have already achieved remarkable success in transforming their business models. The benefits of AI are real and sustainable, but as business leaders continue to push the frontiers of technology and embrace additional use cases of AI, the art of possible will be limited only by our inspiration and our imagination. The art of possible is something that, kind of unique to each one of us and each one of our organization, and somehow the usage and impact of AI will be limited by the art of possible that we can think of. Sustaining the AI advantage requires organizations to address challenges related to talent, data, technology, and governance, including critical aspects related to AI ethics, accountability, and explainability. Doing so will enable business leaders to build stakeholder trust and rapidly scale their AI programs. This is all that I had. The report is available on the NASSCOM website. NASSCOM members can download it for free. Thank you all for having me here. Sudeep, over to you.
Thank you, Achyuta. Thanks for sharing the insights of the report. Uh, with that, I would like to move to the next part of this AI Parley, and that would be the first panel discussion. And it would be my pleasure to introduce Snigdha Ray, a seasoned global product and tech executive with rich experiences in taking concepts to highly engaged customers in SaaS solution generating around 2.5 billion of revenues. She seeded and grew the data science COE in ADP, India, and was instrumental in developing the data cloud offerings across analytics, predictive models, and benchmarks. At PayPal, which is her current company, she has been a strong advocate to leverage the rich payments data to engage customers and make PayPal the best way to pay. Thank you, Snigdha, for joining us, and I pass over the baton to you.
Sure. Thank you, Sudeep. It has been fabulous being part of the third edition of the AI Parley. Extremely good insights from both Sankarshan and Achyut. Most of us in this space will be able to exactly correlate and agree with all the findings. No surprises over there. And yes, I have had a pretty good stint in this space. Within PayPal, that is again in the digital payment space, we have seen some interesting changes the last few years. We have definitely seen a lot of competition from not just payment providers, but also ecosystem players like Google and Apple, mega commerce players like Walmart and Amazon, right? And this definitely alludes to what we heard just now. There is immense amount of pressure. Just add to it all the global regulatory changes that are happening in the BFSI space. It is putting a lot of pressure on us to adapt to these models. And third, finally, just like we are here talking about the benefits of AI, I think all of us are aware of the perpetrators who are constantly investing in the latest of fraud techniques, and they are finding out a lot of novel techniques to break our systems, right? So security becomes, again, a very, very pressing focus for us. The industry itself has seen $650 billion losses in fraud alone last year. And this 2019, trust me, this year it's been crazy because of COVID. Now, this means that 1.5 to 1.7% average of our revenues, of this industry's revenues, are just losses because of fraud alone. Now, let's understand what's happening in the AI space, right? In the AI space, we are seeing a huge amount of data with a lot of instrumentation. We are capturing a lot of data. We have huge computing power with the GPUs, and definitely a lot of deep learning and advanced technology that today we are not bogged down with feature engineering or data engineering. And I remember Sankarshan say that no more POCs are required. This is a well-used technology and ML. Let's just go and adapt it. So now with how do you deal with the margin pressures and revenue pressures? I think it comes down to customer acquisition faster than your competition. And second, which is where we will focus on in our panel discussion today, how do you reduce the losses due to risks and operational improvements so we can handle compliance better, regulatory changes better. Now, I have two extremely esteemed panelists out here who I am eagerly waiting to introduce to you all. While we've seen the overall report presented by Achyut, I think we will delve into two specific industries out here and ask our esteemed panelists to share what's happening in their space. So let me introduce Mohan Narayanaswamy. He's a country head for Chubb in India. He has set up the India operations digital COE that is both ops and tech teams in Hyderabad and Bangalore. He has been in tech for past 25 years and has a postgraduate qualification in computer science and has also done his securities industry certification from Wharton. Prior to Chubb, Mohan has been responsible for setting up GCs in India for both BNY Mellon and EDS. He has been in the BFSI sector for quite some time. So welcome, Mohan. Our second panelist and equally impressive is Ravi Varghese. He's a founder and CEO of Customer Experience. He is a creator of category-leading banking, enterprise, financial crime risk management, product innovation. He again has 25 years of perfecting process of concept to commercialization of banking products. He has introduced 12 new products to the world, now used by leading banks across the world. He has an MBA from IIM Bangalore and a BTech from IIT BHU. They are not only from different industries. One is an insurance, one is a more niche segment in fraud, but also caters to a larger scope of industries within BFSI. But what's wonderful is we also have a mix of MNC as well as a startup. So welcome, Ravi. My first question is, how would you explain to us, or how could you explain to us the uniqueness of banking in the BFSI, and what are the opportunities and challenges where fraud management in BFSI is different? Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Snigdha. See, when we look at banking, the thought that comes to my mind is that of a human soul. Every human being has a soul, a living soul, which is a sum total of what I am since my birth. Okay, that makes me unique. Something similar happens in a bank. Among all the industries on the planet, banking is the only industry which is probably capturing the customer's soul. Okay, every other industry probably has just a portion of a customer's life. Whereas in a bank, I know how much salary you get, and I know what do you do, how often do you travel abroad to, within the first 2 weeks of you receiving your salary, what kind of spends you do across different channels, and where do your kids study, and how, including things like how much of gas that you fill in your car. So that way, banking is probably one of the smartest industries on the planet because of the sheer richness of data that is available in a bank. So that makes banking unique, and it also gives them a perspective which is completely different from other segmented providers. So if you have somebody who is just focusing on probably a fraud segment of credit cards, or somebody who is just focusing on internet banking fraud and so on, that's one simple siloed way of looking at things. But when you put all these things together inside a bank, you have phenomenally larger data sets. So that's what makes banks unique. You have phenomenal amount of data. So technically, theoretically, that will make you the smartest industry on the planet. But having said that, when you do this, banking is also having a lot of regulatory compliance and those kind of issues. So regulators don't understand that you're making decisions on a probability. Whereas in a marketing world, it's easy. I'm 85% confident or 95% confident. Now, this problem exists. There are a lot of regulatory scenarios that we need to worry about, wherein people don't, they say, hey, detect everything, and then your false positives will go through the roof. So how do you handle this in banking? So the way we handle that, and we recommend people to handle that, is always go for a segment of one, and also have a segment of many. And these two are akin to our human brains, which needs to work in parallel. What do I mean by that? We have our left side brain, which is taking instantaneous decision. A transaction comes in, a remittance comes in, or it could be anything from any channel, or a teller transaction comes in. You just have 200 milliseconds to bring that intelligence to bear. While this thinking fast brain works, it has to be continuously complemented with one thinking slow brain, which is the AI brain, which is continuously factoring all these things in a very corrective fashion, and bring all these things simultaneously together when that small instant when a transaction is flight. And that's what makes banking and BFSI unique, Snigdha.
Thank you so much, Ravi. Very interesting points that you bring up, and I love the analogy. And I totally agree. It's not just the past data that you can rely on, but in fraud, you cannot let enough of fraud happen to learn from it and then adapt, right? Your learning model. So it isn't as easy and simple that you put it, but I think it definitely helps to know how we can have a wide impact with more data, not just limit to fraud, get more wider data. Thanks a lot. Mohan, insurance, we all know, not just as providers, but also as consumers, is a heavily manual intensive process area, right? And so there is a lot of opportunity out here. And what I would love to hear from you is what have been those use cases that you all went after initially and got benefits, and how did you all then start implementing it for more complex use cases? Over to you, Mohan.
Okay, thank you. So, in fact, Snigdha, and pranams to everybody. Season's greetings. I know it's festive time all over the country. Just to take a step back, I think as Ravi and Snigdha alluded to, and even the earlier speakers, AI is going to be pretty heavy. And in the context of what Niti Aayog says, AI is really positioned, India is really uniquely positioned to become the AI lab of the world. And I think the opportunities in this country are just phenomenal, whether it's social transformation, inclusion, empowerment. And that could be in the areas of the huge areas, healthcare, agriculture. Yesterday, I was just so impressed by hearing about the Indian Alexa for farmers. Now, this is real, imagine our farmers in India get AI-based advice on whatever devices they have. And given the size that controls the economy and getting expert advice to them. So I think it's really getting real there. So, and of course, education and mobility. Education, of course, again, in this times of COVID, overnight, everyone's flipped on, in fact, to a very different education model. So I think necessity being the mother of invention, this is another, in fact, strong example of that. Talking about COVID and relating it to AI, I think there is a very interesting analogy, or I would say connection there. AI, ML, deep learning, all these related technologies really need extraordinary amount of data for it to be processed, patterned, analyzed, etc. And with COVID, almost everything is being digitized now, right? Whether it's contactless services that are being renewed, right from getting your haircut or anything. And then, as I think we alluded to in payments. So there's a whole lot of digitization happening. And I think that's a fundamental building block for ensuring that we are getting in all the raw material, we are collecting it, we are trying to capture all these events. So moving on to the insurance sector, insurance is all about risk and underwriting. So I think the topic of the panel is very appropriate. And insurance sector has been one of the early adopters of analytics and business intelligence. And the sector has demonstrated very high impact outcomes from making data-driven decisions over the past few years. So this is not new. Having said that, AI/ML is used in insurance across the entire life cycle. You could look at product development, right? Examples could be market penetration, local intelligence. All these areas are excellent use cases to find out how your products can be, in fact, developed. Then the next one is around marketing. In marketing, you have the biggest use case is micro-segmentation, right? Behavior modeling. So these are examples where AI can become a big use case there. Distribution, right? Distribution is a huge opportunity. How you can pre-qualify leads, depending on a whole lot of other use cases, which I'll come down to a little later, right? Then underwriting, of course, the whole backbone and the heart of insurance is about underwriting. Underwriters typically have n number of variables to make a decision. So AI really enables micro decision automation. So some of the decisions which an underwriter typically makes, you could really make it automatically by a machine. And then of course, the other aspects of servicing, claims, operations. So really across the length and breadth, AI has been useful. And again, now I think the biggest challenges, the biggest opportunities for all organizations is to really transform at scale. AI needs a lot of data, so you need to really have extraordinary amount of outcome or the value proposition for do that. So we really need to move on to a culture of what I think in technology we would call platforms. What we've done is we've created a studio platform, and that's really a distribution platform wherein the algorithms creates risk profile so that the purchase time can be reduced from minutes or rather even to seconds, right? So essentially, if you can create a platform wherein you say, okay, my distribution, I can create. And then when I'm saying this as a platform, I'm saying different types of providers, be it banks, be it auto cars, be it other cab aggregators. Every one of them could be our consumers. They already have a client base. We need to give them a platform so that they connect to our platform and then they get distributing our products to their clients almost in seconds. So that's one use case. Second one is fraud detection. I know earlier panelists and speakers also spoke about it. In the insurance industry alone, it's about $40 billion, and this is by FBI. So there's really a huge amount of opportunity there. And I'm actually partnering with one of the leading B schools in Hyderabad, and they have a very interesting and very entertaining use case. There was this real life use case in UK wherein someone filed a claim, and like all digital inputs, the first notice of loss is given through pictures and all the data is given. And the AI engines, which was really a POC, it's not a full-blown use case. The AI engines unfortunately detected for that claimant that he happened to be in a bar partying at that same time. So here is a case where the correlation happens, saying that if you're filing a claim at time t is equal to x, and at the same time I'm finding a social picture of yours on social media partying, it just gives the claim managers an opportunity saying, is this really a fraud case or is this a genuine case? So numerous such use cases where I think trying to correlate multiple sources of input. And I think in today's world, the digital footprint all of us leave everywhere, okay, whether we like it or not, is just unimaginable. Everyone's digital footprint is out there for everyone to see. Claims management. In claims, of course, we are digitizing our internal processes, operations, and customer services. So that's really about where AI is using, right? And in claims management is really about improving the efficiency and accuracy and reducing the processing time. So today, I mean, okay, some of the use cases in claims management is you get a lot of documents which clients give, which insurers ask as proof for the evidence. How do you ingest them? How do you process them? How do you get the machine to do most of it? So that's another big case right now, which is happening. And of course, underwriting. Underwriting, AI is able to identify risks in a much more granular and sophisticated way. So for example, if you look at these use cases, the variables that all of us have, the data that it collects, and if you take it in the life example, that does create good, valuable insights. And then that could potentially create a channel for distribution, depending on the data that is collected at source. So it's really moving from, is really the shift which is happening about it. Of course, there are numerous other examples. I won't get into all of that. But the one thing which is out there, which we've implemented, which is public domain, is especially in cold countries like Boston, insurers the benefits. So these are some of the use cases from an insurance standpoint.
That is extremely enlightening, Mohan. So thank you. I think key takeaways for me was, while IoT is just another medium, but we are able to capture huge amounts of data. And the example story that you shared is an awesome threat, I think, from a consumer standpoint as an individual on what your digital footprint could lead to. But it's good that we are catching such frauds. Platform, again, you touched a very, very important point. You have to think of platforms first, because that's the only way to scale. And then again, you can go beyond your company to sell services outside. So again, for everybody out here, especially in the provider space, I think platform it's like platform first, mobile first is a strategy to adopt. And then again, fantastic point on risk decisioning systems powered by ML. That's going to reduce or make your customer facing people more productive, but they can still take their calls, their decisions backed by data. So awesome. Thanks, Mohan. Given the time that we have, I think I can just take one additional question So really, I think I'll just change the direction of the conversation a bit. Mohan already created a segue for us. As an independent provider of solutions in a very, very niche segment, right? So I think you specialize more in the fraud management space, but then you're looking at a breadth of use cases across industry. So what would be your recommendation for startups or providers in this space on specializing in a certain use case, but looking at, specializing in a certain solution, but looking across the industry for use cases, again, the fintech specifically. Ravi, over to you.
Yeah, so Singha, I'll be able to comment about people focusing on the banking and the that
Right.
space. So what we are seeing is when you look at the data that we have within banks, okay, two things happen. One is there is a yin and a yang in action. What do I mean by that? There are two different things which we think are different but actually are the same. So fraud management and cross-sell, upsell are essentially two sides of the same coin, because you are essentially working on the same set of data. Okay, and COVID per se, that's the first point that people need to keep in mind. COVID per se is giving an entirely new set of challenges to banks. The reason is the customers are no longer coming to you. You're not going to have FaceTime with them. If that is the case, you have to think like a firefly. What is a firefly? A firefly probably has a life of 1 day. In that 1 day, that firefly has to, be a teenager to an adult, to get old, to get married, have a family. Everything needs to happen. So similarly, you will have to bring all these calculations to bear in that split second once a transaction is in flight, because you don't know whether another customer, you might get another opportunity to do a transaction with this particular customer, because he may not come back to you. You might think that, hey, he's a good customer of mine, so he's going to come and buy the high-end loan that he has. No, he's not. Probably he's going to go to a fintech and take the cheapest loan. So if that is the case, your moment of truth is just that single transaction in flight, that extreme transaction in flight. And you, like a firefly, you have to leave everything in that split second. That means you have to take care of compliance, you have to take care of fraud, you have to take care of cross-sell, upsell, you have to take care of revenue, charge recovery, everything happening in that that particular moment. So from the startups who are focused on banking and in this particular space, I would request you to focus on this aspect, getting it more extreme. We will not have these extreme cases probably in other industries, but banking, if you are having these kind of capabilities, it will be very relevant to banks, and they will love you for that.
Awesome, Ravi. Fantastic point. I think as a consumer, sometimes it scares me seeing the number of notifications and the banks chasing me with cross-sell and upsell. So yes, we need to do that. But of course, keep in mind that you do not want to turn away consumers, but find out what is the, what is it that will attract them. And yes, the current transaction is the moment. Fantastic example again about the firefly. Try to do as much as you can in that single transaction and start from a basic to a high-end use case, right? To capture the attention. And one final thing I could really connect with you is, while we're going to always be fantastic decisioning systems and a lot of data, I think it is a trade-off always on how much, what are those two levers, right? Customer experience versus risk. Do you let the transaction go through? Do you not let the transaction go through? What is the impact to your business? So awesome insights from both of you. Thank you, Mohan and Ravi, for a fantastic session. Over to you, Sudeep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Snigdha, Mohan, and Ravi. Really insightful. With that, we move to the next panel discussion. And for that, I would like to invite Ranjan. So my pleasure to introduce Ranjan Rao, who's a partner at EY Consulting, focusing on strategy and digital transformation programs for clients, especially around use and adoption of innovative business models and new emerging technologies around automation and artificial intelligence. He has over 2 decades of industry and consulting experience, managing large engagements in the area of strategy, business, and operating model design, as well as digital automation-led process transformation, process improvements, etc., across sectors. Ranjan has a postgraduate diploma in management from SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai, and has a bachelor's degree from University of Mysore. Ranjan, over to you to moderate the next panel.
Thank you, Sudeep. Thank you again. And thank you for all the earlier panelists and Sankarshan for a wonderful session. It's my pleasure to be part of this third edition of the AI Parley. I think this is a wonderful initiative from Ktech Centre of Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. And I think powered by NASSCOM as well, right? No, it's been wonderful having hearing to Sankarshan and then Ravi, Mohan, Snigdha, everyone. I think insights were pretty interesting as well. So we hope to have continue the discussion along the same lines, and I'm sure my co-panelist would be providing some great insights. Without any ado, what I'll do is the topic that we have for the second panel is about how do we look at AI in the customer engagement, or the customer management in the BFSI sector, right? I think that's a key ask, and I know Ravi mentioned a wonderful point. I think he said banking industry or the BFSI is actually capturing the soul of the customers. I think that's an interesting point, and hopefully we should build something around that. So let me introduce my co-panelist. I have Padmapriya Saraswatilu. Padmapriya is a technology leader with 24 years of experience in the BFSI sector across large service providers and investment banking majors as well. She's currently the Chief Operating Officer in AXA Business Services, managing technology areas for her offshore center. She's also heading the Global Automation Center of Excellence. And I believe her team is working on various emerging technologies, including AI, in the insurance domain areas. So welcome, Padmapriya.
Thank you so much.
Get some insights from you, what your team is doing and what you're doing in the industry as well. Right. The second panelist is Hitesh Sachdev. Hitesh is a veteran banker with ICICI Group with over 19 years of rich and diverse experience across different sectors from a banking interaction point of view and from the clientele, right? I think what is interesting also is he focuses on innovation and fintech for ICICI Group, ICICI Bank, and he heads the startup engagement and investments at ICICI Bank. He is an active member of and a mentor to many of the growing fintech startups in the domains around artificial intelligence, open banking, and especially around blockchain. I think that'd be interesting to hear from Hitesh as well. In his current profile, he's also responsible for what ICICI has got as a blockchain infrastructure company. It's apparently India's first blockchain-based banking consortium, which was conceptualized by him in 2018. So welcome, Hitesh. It would be good to get some rich and diverse insights and experience from what you've done with the startup ecosystem and also around new technologies. So welcome.
Thanks, Ranjan. Thanks, Ranjan, for the kind words.
Okay. So again, I mean, I don't want to get into how I think artificial intelligence has been one of the key drivers for the sector as such. But a couple of points, I think what really resonated from the discussion that we had earlier was, if you look at what Sankarshan mentioned, AI is no longer something which you have to do POCs for many of the existing AI technology. I think he is absolutely spot on when he says that. In my experience, I think if you look at the AI history, starting from the 50s when AI was talked about and coined as a term, the AI winter actually happened in the 70s and 80s when there was a slowdown on AI as such. But afterwards, there's significant developments in AI and a lot of small solutions. I think small innovative solutions have come out, which are actually making their presence felt in the market with a lot of end customers and the businesses and organizations as well. So I think that's a good point. And with that, hopefully we'll have some conversations going in. What I'll do is, knowing that we have only 20 odd minutes left, maybe quickly jump into some of the conversations with Priya and Hitesh. So one of the things that, if you look at the Indian BFSI sector, as we all know, is a major contributor to the growth of our economy. And I think the best part is in the last few years, the significant financial and mobile adoption among the masses. And I know technology, especially around the emerging tech, has been a key driver. So Priya, let's start with you. How do you see this evolving, and how do you see AI playing a major role in some of these innovations that will come to a lot of the customers, end users as such? Priya?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the question. And it's very interesting in the context that we are in today. So I would actually start with just talking about the Indian fintech, just the growth of it. And I think in the COVID times, and we talked about operations being impacted, but I think a big thing about digital transformation actually has happened in the COVID times, or at least in the lockdowns and the work from home. It's kind of forced us to become more digital than ever before. So kind of moving from mandatory to discretionary, actually from discretionary to mandatory in that sense, because you have no other choice but to become more digital. And I think some of the reports that have been published is also talking about India being the second highest number of fintechs, right behind the US. It's, in a way, it is already beaten UK and China, and some of the reports of 2019 say so. And a lot of investment going in, more than $10 billion in this space, payments being the biggest, taking of the big part of the pie, but also lending and insurtech. I think that's how I would put it. And from a city standpoint, I think Mumbai and Bangalore are kind of leading those fintechs. Now, if you talk about fintech market and how it's thriving, I think there are still many untapped areas that we can actually look into in terms of evolving in those areas. There is much better and easier access to capital, rising the expectations from customers, even in the BFSI sectors, to have Uber-like experience than ever before. And I think now with both of these points, I think there is enough supply from what we are seeing from fintech and its growing base, but also there is enough demand. So I think the customers also are evolving. Now it's about marrying the two, or at least doing it faster, I would say. There's an increasing number of digital transactions also that we see. And if you talk about India's revolution itself, I think a lot has happened even during demonetization period, when a lot of people moved to smartphones, a lot of people moved to contactless and cashless payments. I think banking and insurance providers also are making enough and more efforts towards digital transformation. So I would say that it's going to a more relevant and much more relevant, bigger and a better market in that sense. So I would see this growing much, much more in the future.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Priya. I think that's very interesting. And like you rightly said, it's been happening in India for the past few years. I think demonetization probably was the starting of I would say a leap in terms of digital adoption. But I think you brought an interesting point about the fintech and the India being the second or third largest in terms of the fintech, and that's very true as well. I think the report that Achita released would have some of the data points around that. But I think going back to the question I had, Hitesh, you have been working with startups for quite some time. I think you've been even mentoring a lot of these startup ecosystems as such. What's your experience of how do you think the fintech startup ecosystem is going to help us in a greater adoption of AI for BFSI sector?
Yeah, so I think if you see fundamentally, three things are driving fintech adoption in the BFSI segment. One is about the cost. Fintech adoption is helping large enterprises to reduce cost by bringing efficiency in their processes and decongesting some of the bottlenecks which are present in the legacy systems. Second is it is helping to reach out to customers in either to hinterlands or like Bharat, tier 3, tier 4 cities without increasing the cost. So it helps in acquiring customers at a very low cost. So in turn, it helps in increasing revenue. And third thing is about experience. It helps you to create a wow experience on your digital properties so that the adoption kicks in and engagement goes upwards. So there are the three fundamental factors. We have seen, huge fintech adoption when it comes to BFSI segment. And obviously, one of the factors can be evidenced by what Priya mentioned about the investments, right? So, in last 1 year only, we have seen around $3.7 billion getting invested in fintech startups, right? There are also factors like low penetration of the financial services or government initiatives like one can say JAM, India Stack, account aggregation guidelines, open banking framework. These are all pillars which are supporting and accelerating the fintech adoption in the BFSI segment. So we at ICICI Bank has always believed in technology as the force multiplier for all our businesses. And we have been leveraging our fintech partnerships. We have created a separate platform to engage and collaborate with fintech startups. Objective is to co-create products with them and launch it in our ecosystem. We have seen it, across various domains of payments, lending, blockchain. Across, we are using it, and it's kind of, we are believing that it brings promoting the innovation at the edge, which in turn, help us to strengthen our core. So my sense is that this is just the beginning. I think we'll see more and more adoption, more and more legacy oriented frameworks getting transformed into modern age agile fintech framework.
Well, that's interesting. I think you said it's only a beginning, and we're going to start from here. I think I like that because we are not satisfied with what we have achieved till now. It's always allows us to grow much further as well. But coming back to the point that Priya, you said about the COVID has led to greater adoption of some of these technologies. Absolutely, I think the pandemic has been a major, I would say, a challenge for all the world economies as such. And I think one of the key aspects around what COVID has done is because of the lockdowns, and I'm sure the challenges around that is people are no longer visiting. I think, and if you look at the BFSI or especially around the banking, they're all in-person physical establishments. They always kind of interact with each other. You mentioned about some of the technological use cases or examples that you've been working on in terms of how do you actually use AI to improve customer engagement. What's your take on it? I mean, where do you see this going? And maybe if you can just, for the sake of the audience, give some examples of what you've been doing in AXA for that part.
Sure. We at AXA actually believe in customer first. So twice the first. And I think when you talk about customer engagement, a lot of questions arise in the mind in terms of where are the demands and how are the demands being created for the different insurance products, or how are the customers making purchasing decisions? What are the value added services that the insurers are providing to the customers now? What are the kind of services that the customers want, or what are the experience? I think end of the day, it all boils down to the customer experience, especially in the event of a claim. Now, when you talk about customer experience, I think that actually is the true, competitive edge that it gives over one provider versus the other. And insurance companies anyway should focus more on also not only the particular individual you're looking at, but also looking at the customer's friends and family. And we all know, and we all have taken insurance products in the past. I think we all depend on our ecosystem to provide us the right guidance in terms of which is the good policy to take, how easy it is to do a claim, a renewal, and so on. And I think from that standpoint, it's very important to concentrate on communicating their services to the customers. So where does AI fit into all of these things, right? I think communication with the customers is what I would say is the most important thing. And more importantly, now with the new way of living our lives, I think what are we changing in our insurance products? I think that has been the key important aspect. And it should be more of a push than a pull. And most of the times when you look at, insurance takers, they're actually trying to pull information from various sources, trying to put it together, trying to compare one versus the other. But it would rather be very useful if I had all the list of all the ones coming to me on a regular basis, given the context of where we are. I think the digital services actually really help in building this model of pushing the relevant sources. And it's all based on not just the random push, but more using machine learning AI in all of these. And now we can build models very well with at least 80% accuracy. And when you talk about models and accuracy, I think importantly, it boils down to two aspects. One is talking about the data. So unless you have data, you can't really look at the predictions. And I know in the past panel, somebody talked about, biases. But I think for the most part, 80% of it, we can say that we have hit the nail on the head, but 20% obviously will be a little bit here and there. But at least 80% accuracy you can do, because there is enough and much more data on insurance and insurance takers, providers, and the whole market. And building trends based on a customer segment. I think that would be the key important thing. And I think data is there. Now, second bit of it is the technology. And like we talked about already in the session today, there is no need to do any POCs anymore. AI itself, machine learning models so many are available out there, which can easily be experimented. And when we take a particular business case, you don't really work with one model, right? You try to put in 2-3 models and try to bring out things which is the maximum accuracy and go with that. So I think even we have both. We have the data, we have now also the enough of technology advancements in this kind of emerging tech, which can actually bring it together and bring out the best possible customer engagement and experience to our customers. And I think a more important thing is creating the wow factor. How much of a scary it may be that, everybody is, able to guess what I would be expecting more than anybody else, and the machine telling me what I should be doing next. How many times have we not clicked that one single movie that has popped up in Netflix, which says, I think Priya, this is a good recommendation for you. I would have definitely clicked it and gone with that. So I think at some point we're looking for somebody to tell us also what would be the next thing for us to do. And I think in adopting the new technology, I think fits very well. I think claims processing is one element. Just one last point is that the last bit of the customer retention is on how easy it is for me from a customer, claim standpoint and the whole experience that I have. I think this bit of it also ensuring that I get precise data, error-free, and also consistent. I know when I talk to one call center person versus another, there are so many times you will have different information that people are giving. But I think engine behind can actually give the relevant information, still keeping the person aspect of it, not taking away the importance of a personal human touch, but at least it can give the human the information that they can actually take it to the next level. So I would say this is how I think technology fits very well in the customer management standpoint.
No, I think great insights, Priya. I think what you said, I was about to ask you the question about what Sankarshan actually mentioned about the AI bias, right? And
Yes.
That's one of the biggest things with Trust AI and all of those things coming up as well. But you covered that, you preempted me on that. Good one. No, and your point about AI today being used for a lot of analysis, and classic example has been about the Netflix push part of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, wonderful use of, I would say, AI in pockets, like small projects which are actually going to make a big difference.
Exactly.
So maybe, I know Hitesh, I cannot let out ICICI Bank out of it, because one of the pioneers in using technology from a customer engagement, whether it's onboarding, and I remember maybe 20 years back when I was opening my account, I think the experience was wonderful at that point of time. But maybe for the benefit of the audience and probably for larger sharing of experience, maybe a few interesting examples of case studies that you think from how ICICI Bank has adopted AI to enhance your customer engagement from what you've been doing before?
Thanks, Ranjan, for those kind words. And I think as a digital first bank, we have been continuously innovating, to serve the needs of our customers and stakeholders for today and for tomorrow as well, right? We continuously keep innovating. So maybe rather than, let me give you a few examples, which would be interesting, how we are using AI for our customer engagements. So, during the COVID period, we launched video KYC, wherein if you want to open an account, if you want to kind of take a loan, one of the important process in the banking is, you need to do KYC. So our video KYC platform is it got introduced during the COVID period because personally you can't meet up with the customers. So it's working very well and at a scale where now we are kind of opening up our bank accounts. We are offering, personal loans, credit cards using, video KYC platform. And this is just not video KYC, it's a video banking platform. So what happens at times when you want to do a lending decision, you also need to interact with customers. So this also helps our credit managers to, interact with the customer through this platform. And the way this has been built, there are a lot of, plugins which you have made. So like when customers submit the documents, those are all verified, authenticated by machine, right? In terms of whether these are fake documents, whether there are errors, fetching out data from those documents so the customer doesn't need to fill up the form, right? So that's one set of example. The other set of example is that we have enabled voice banking on Alexa, Google, and other platforms, where customer at his own convenient time can interact with those platforms and get whatever services one needs from the bank. We've been kind of using WhatsApp as one of the important channels for doing banking. So people who are very comfortable using WhatsApp and through chats can open up fixed deposits, using WhatsApp. We've been using chatbots. Our flagship chatbot, which is on our website, handles more than a large amount of our customer queries are kind of handled by that chatbot. It has been trained over a period of time, and accuracy levels have continuously kind of improved and improved, as it has kind of been able to consume more and more data. Some of the other examples are we've been using, virtual relationship we have a platform for our virtual relationship managers, which are interacting with the customers remotely and offering products, helping them, offering the right set of products. We are also using AI in a lot of predictive analytics while we offer loans, where we have kind of created a portfolio of pre-approved loans, where if you are a customer, we don't ask any income documents or any other documents from you. We create a limit on you, which you can utilize at your convenience without you asking for a loan. We already created a loan limit, and that is where we are using a lot of our machine learning models in terms of how much limit, basis what data, what behavior. We are using a lot of satellite data to engage in agri domain, where we are using satellite data doing lending in agri, and we're using machine learning to interpret this satellite data. So I can keep talking, I think, but these are the couple of examples where we have been using AI extensively.
No, absolutely. I know. We probably don't have good amount of time to talk about all the examples, because I think, like you rightly said, there have been quite a few, I think, innovations and use of AI in some of the daily use cases. And I think what would be interesting from India as a country and economy would be also to see how can we actually increase the farm output, or use AI to actually manage credit better to our agriculturists as well. I think that's probably a use case which I'll probably connect separately with you. But I think maybe one question I picked up from what you said, you mentioned about the chatbots, or you mentioned about Alexa and Google Home. It's interesting because, chatbots have been around for quite some time. And I know it's many people probably started using chatbot, but they were kind of disillusioned by not so having that wow factor, what Priya was talking about as a experience. But I see some of the, what I call it, can I call it as a return of a chatbot or intelligent chatbot in that sense. Do you think customers are now revolving around using more and more chatbot services compared to what was happening before? Hitesh, maybe, or any Priya.
So So it's like, sorry, Priya, you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. It's I think a behavioral study, right? When people interact with your call centers, there is a human element to it. And when they ask questions, somewhere in their mind, they feel that I might be judged, right? In terms of what kind of questions I'm asking.
Okay.
So with chatbots, I think that's not the case, yeah, right? Chatbot is not going to judge you. There is nobody, who will going to judge you. So to that extent, customers are very comfortable, using chatbots and, asking whatever questions they have without fear of being judged. Second is that we have seen that it's very convenient, right? I mean, at any given point in time, whether it is even late night, you can kind of interact. It's 24/7, and it's kind of very prompt in terms of replying. Also, your vernacular, content which is now available, people can kind of ask questions in their own vernacular languages. And the last part which you mentioned is about chatbots kind of becoming more intelligent, right? Where it is just not restricted to answering few FAQs, but how do you understand the underlying sentiments when somebody asks you a question? And that's, I think, the biggest evolution, I feel, which is driving the adoption of the chatbots, where with lot of data, I mean, you need to train it, and it takes time. With lot of this data being handled by our chatbot platforms, we have seen that it has become more and more intelligent. It is able to understand the sentiment of the customers when they are asking questions, and accordingly contextualizing it and answering those questions has definitely helped in higher and higher adoption.
I think that's a good point. And you mentioned about being judged, whereas chatbot being a neutral one would not judge. I think that's a good part of it as well. Priya, anything to add? Maybe a few, I know we have short time, but maybe a few minutes.
Yeah, so just coming back to customers again, I would say is that normally you want to talk to them to grow your business. But interestingly, when you talk to many of the management executives, right, and when they were surveyed, they actually said that they don't really communicate at all about the new products and services. And I think that's where some of these things around the chatbot, while I'm interacting with a virtual assistant to resolve a query, for example, there is a lot more information I can also pass on, saying that, do you want to try this or do you want to look at it? Because I already know from the user's standpoint or customer standpoint, what are they looking for? So I can also suggest a few things. I think that is one way a virtual assistant can be used, not just to answer the queries or resolve something, but also to grow the business. But also to add to what Hitesh mentioned, I think the adoption of the virtual assistants is now than ever before, I think. If you just go back in time in March, April this year, there were no call center staff. Any email that I sent, everybody said because of COVID, the emails will be, response will be delayed and so on. So every of the customers started to look for answers themselves. So in a way, I think the surrounding environment around us or the situation that we are in has forced most of the clients or customers to become more self-sufficient, where a virtual assistant will fit perfectly. Because at least the major ones of the queries, I don't have to wait, first of all, because of lack of staff for 10 minutes for my query to be answered. And second, thinking that I just want one thing. Can you just take the phone and answer that one question, which easily can be answered by a virtual assistant? So I think adoption now will be a lot more faster because everybody is already in that mode, saying, I know I am not going to be able to talk to somebody if I want to, but I can get my query resolved. I think that is something that definitely will work. Things around the call centers, things like service desk, are great places to start this with, because of the lack of staff, or also even basic queries. Even forget even the COVID for 1 second. The number of queries that come to, if you do an analysis to the call centers and service desk, are basic queries, which can easily be resolved by itself. Of course, you can write, this whole FAQs, some running into some 200 pages. But at least if I just quickly ask a question, I get a response, I'll be the happiest customer. That's where I think the virtual assistants fit very well into our environment.
No, absolutely. I think today with the predictive algorithm and engines that we have, I think the text to conversion, all those things will actually, help in doing better analysis of the customer sentiment as well, right? So I know we have, I think, come to the end of the hour, but I think wonderful insights, Priya and Hitesh. Great to have you, and you know, it's been interesting to hear some of the case studies and examples. I'm sure the audience and the attendees enjoyed as much as I enjoyed hosting you. If I have to summarize before I hand over to Sudeep, maybe one line, considering what we've seen, I think for the industry and BFSI as a whole, artificial intelligence is no longer an option, if I can say that way. It's an imperative, and make sure that you don't end up doing only POCs. Go ahead and implement it. With that, thank you, everyone. Thanks for the time, and over to you, Sudeep. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjan. Thank you, Padma, Priya, and Hitesh. Rightly said, it's, you know, AI is no longer a choice, it's an imperative. And with that, we come to an end of this very, very insightful AI Parley. On behalf of Ktech, COE, DS&AI, and NASSCOM, I would like to thank all of you who stayed back and attended this session for the last 90 minutes. Special thanks to the audience. And also would like to thank Shankaskan, Achyuta, Snigdha, Rivi, Mohan, Ranjan, Padma, Priya, and Hitesh. And we look forward to having you again for another session. Do follow us on our social handles and look forward to the next session. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.